Steve, how are you?
Yeah.
Bob, where are you up to? Okay. Going to Palm Springs. So you guys are both going to get a tan.
Great.
Okay.
Sort of. All right. It is. It's 5 o'clock, and I'd like to call the work session to order. Before we get to fire, Corey would like the floor for a little discussion about
Yes.
security.
Yes, thank you. So because we have several of you that are new to the council, just want to go over some of the security features in the council chambers and behind the dais. So first of all, tempered glass. This door next to the dais and closest up should always remain locked.
Okay.
And so if you ever see that open, we'll try to keep that. So this way, the idea behind that, if there is a threat, it has to come, it's more visible, it comes to the furthest door, and then there's also ballistic panels behind the dais. So if there's any incident that would happen, those were put in several years ago after the New Hope Council incident. So we took some added security features. So understand that there's also 3 panic buttons in and around the various positions behind the dais and at the desk up here. Just a simple doorbell. Understand that when those are pushed, you won't hear a active alarm or a audible, that those go directly to our dispatch, and we'll have it. So those are intended for emergencies where you need an immediate response, and we're going to send a lot of resources when those panic buttons go off. There's also an evacuation plan that I don't feel comfortable in explaining now what that is, so I'll send that out in an email to the council in the weekly update, with Adam's weekly update, to explain what the evacuation plan in regards to severe weather, threat, fire, and whatnot.
Great. And so if there were to be an incident, we should duck below.
Yep. And then I'll send you the evacuation plans once how to proceed from there.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And my job's done. I'm going to enjoy the Thank you.
All right. And I think Steve's going to kind of walk us through this, but you sent out some materials. I guess they're attached to our.
Yeah, so this is mostly the Steve show, but Steve had asked about how fire coverage works in Orono and what we might do in the future. So to set the stage, did throw a few slides in there to talk about the history of coverage. This comes out of the needs assessment, and just was there to kind of show how the coverage of our city has changed over the years. Most recently, and I know the one that Steve's talked to me about was the Long Lake fire taking over the Wayzata area, which was this area over on the far side of the city, basically everything coming off of Ferndale Road north. That was turned over in 2018, at the end of 2017. Before that, obviously, at one time we had Mound, Maple Plain, Wayzata, Long Lake, and for a brief period, Excelsior Fire, all covering bits and pieces of the city over the years. Obviously, going back to the 1960s, things started to change in the 80s and as we moved forward. That's just to try to put things in context. I just threw this slide in. This is what it looks like today for the land. And then I also threw in this slide that I learned about in the last couple of years, which the area fire chiefs put together a number of years ago to kind of color code and show how everybody covered the various parts of Lake Minnetonka. There is one discrepancy on this, and that's there's a color code on here that doesn't quite match just with the way it prints, but that's kind of how that was laid out.
So does this suggest that Forest Lake is covered by Mound?
Forest Lake, on this slide, is covered by Long Lake and Mound.
Oh, and, okay.
Yeah.
That's a secondary.
Second, yep.
Got
Just
it.
like Lafayette Bay here is covered by Excelsior with Mound. So backup.
Got it, okay.
And so on. So there's the little circles with the tube is
That'd be the backup.
the
Okay.
backup. Yep.
Got it.
And then the other thing, depending on what we were going to talk about today, I just went, one of the things that I noticed when I went back and looked at our old fire service agreements is they tend to be very vague on services provided. Some of them just say the Maple Plain Fire Department will provide services to Orono in the same manner as they do their own citizens, and that's all it says. And which may have been great back in the days when all we wanted our fire departments to do is provide a response, but there are many, many other services our fire departments are supposed to provide. So I went and actually pulled this from the Minnesota Townships template for fire agreements of the various different types of services one would expect a fire department to provide. So if we were going to talk about different ways that other agencies other than the Long Lake Orono was going to do, we would probably want to talk about what is it that we would want somebody like Wayzata or Maple Plain or something like that to do. Is it all forms of firefighting, or is it just response, or is it certain types of emergency response? And there may be different versions of that we would want to look at if we were to go search for support elsewhere. But that was all I had. I didn't really know. I know Steve's been asking to talk about this, so that's why I put it on the agenda.
That's great. So the information we sent out is really good. I really appreciated the history that was put together. Really, what I wanted to talk a little bit about starts with the fire services area coverage. And so, first of all, again, thank you for the information that was put together. I think it's helpful. One of the reasons that I wanted to review the current coverage was to make sure that we continue to prioritize public safety. In my opinion, we need to have the best response with qualified fire departments we can for every resident in the city of Orono. And to me, in my opinion, and I think many others in the community, we have great fire departments. In addition to Long Lake and Orono Fire Department, we have great departments around us, whether it's Wayzata, Maple Plain, Excelsior, Mound, Hamel, Loretto, and Plymouth, and anybody else that I may have missed. I think that the departments that are around us have been great partners with us over the years, and we don't want to lose sight of the fact that what they provide is equally important to not only their communities, but in many cases, the mutual aid that they provide for the city of Orono. So in 2002, as you said, when I was the fire chief, Long Lake took over the northwestern part of Orono. And we did so, we were very clear in that it was not something being driven by the Long Lake Fire Department, the officers, or the membership at all. It was being requested by the city of Orono. So we made that publicly clear, and then we accepted responsibility for the northwestern part of Orono and removed that from Maple Plain at the time. In 2018, the Long Lake Fire Department was directed to take over the eastern part of Orono. I think James was the chief at the time, and I don't think that he ran Orono and said we'd like to cover that area. He was asked to cover it, and he took on the responsibility to do it. Yeah. It should also be noted that since 2018, Orono has provided very little capital funds to support Long Lake Fire Department for the purchase of any capital equipment, including the recent denial on November 12th of a grass rig that they were purchasing. That Orono declined to participate in that purchase. Based on conversations with the current Long Lake Fire Department fire chief as well as the Wayzata chief, they both agree that the eastern part of Orono should in fact go back to Wayzata. These were casual discussions that I had with both chiefs. So what I'm asking and recommending is that staff reach out to the cities of Wayzata and Maple Plain to have conversations about restoring Wayzata Fire Department services to the east and Maple Plain Fire Services to the west. The details of those services can be talked about and vetted as they were kind of outlined in page 4 of the deck that you put together. We can certainly do that. But that's what I would ask, in my opinion, I'd like to ask staff to do. So I'd be open to that up for discussion with the group.
Certainly from a distance point of view, from the fire departments themselves, it would be providing better coverage or quicker coverage. If we were to go back to Wayzata.
I think so. I mean, and that's, that was one of the first comments that was made by Chief Highland in Long Lake was they can get there faster and they have certainly a fire department that can provide the proper services, response services to that area. So once I got this, I brought into the conversation Maple Plain, because I think as long as we're reaching to the east, we should also at least reach to the west and see if that in fact would be an improved level of service to the folks that live in that area that was in 2002 moved out of Maple Plain and into Long Lake.
Do we have, there's loads of data about, existing call response times, et cetera, for Long Lake. Do we have comparable data from Wayzata and Maple Plain to sort of test that out?
I think the important part is to start the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
And just to see, I guess I'd ask to get your thoughts and point of view on the coverages and how they, where they were and how they are now. Just any thoughts you may be able to shed on.
I would say if all things were equal, right, just proximity, they are closer, absolutely. Different models lead to having people at the station like we have right now for certain periods of time. So does that, then we have to take a look into account of that, right? So if you have a turnout time of rather than 4 to 6 minutes, if you have a turnout time of 1 to 2 minutes, what does that do? And does that level the playing field, if you want to call it that? I don't know. We'd have to look into that and ask for kind of everybody's call data, to those areas to see what it's like, right? The other, you talked about qualified firefighters. I mean, we'd have to figure out what that quantifies. What does that mean? From that, and then go through kind of Adam's list like we talked about to see what would we want if we wanted to switch. What would we want them to do? Initially, do we want dual response to the area for both fire departments to, because Long Lake is running duty crews also currently, to that area and see what the response times really are. I mean, there's a bunch of ways that you can look into that.
Yeah.
I'd also be interested in, modeling that financially.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's a.
Well, that'll be a big part of the negotiation too, is figuring out once we approach Wayzata or Maple Plain and what would this cost.
Right.
I mean, just for this meeting, I did go and pull the last agreement we had with Wayzata for 2017, and that the annual cost for their coverage of that area was $28,000 that year. So did the simple math of 3% interest or inflation a year, that would be about $37,000. But again, I think as the chief was talking about, as we go and we look at what is it would want them to do. If it's just response or certain types of response, maybe there's a different dollar value. I don't know until we have those discussions. Whereas if we're still going to do code enforcement, disaster response, some of these other things that are that we expect out of fire departments these days, then there's maybe a different pricing model, and then there may be a different model. As the old model was just here's our area, just do everything. Maybe again there's a hybrid. Until we start talking to the neighboring departments, we don't know what they'd be willing to do and what they'd charge us for.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you can take a look at a full-time department just up the road, Plymouth. I mean, you can get to the North Ferndale fairly quick too. I do remember the house fire we had on 6th and Willow, and their engine almost beat us there because they heard the call come through and they started that way, and they were, on scene shortly after the second alarm went through on the page. So, I mean, call models make a difference too. So
For sure.
Do you know if both those other departments, Wayzata and Maple Plain, are paid on call?
They are.
They are.
Places, I think they're both. I think Wayzata's a full-time chief, and then Maple Plain's got paid on-call first.
I don't believe Kevin's full-time there, but he acts full-time because he's in town all the time. I mean, he's a property manager for the business down there.
Downtown.
Yeah, exactly. So he can
Park up top and.
Exactly. He's basically a full-time chief, but they're not paying him.
Right.
I think it sounds like a good idea. I mean, I think it's always smart to look at what's going on around us and take that into consideration and widen the lens a bit here.
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea.
I guess my only question or concern is the impacts doing this has on our current negotiations with the city of Long Lake and the Long Lake fire coverage.
Yeah, well, it's been brought up to them and they didn't seem to be concerned at all about
Okay.
this change.
And as with all of the different alternatives that are being considered, I would assume that we would be gathering public input on what the city wants, right?
100%. It's my understanding that in 2017 this was actually proposed, but some people from Wayzata asked that it be delayed, so it was delayed a year in Orono, and then the following year it was passed on a consent agenda or something along those lines. It was just pushed through to shift the coverage. So again, that's we looked into some so.
With regard to Maple Plain, do you know how their department is structured? Because are they not as, do they share services, or is West Suburban involved over there? No, I mean,
It's my
not
understanding.
to open a can of worms, but I
Yeah,
just.
no, it's my understanding that West Suburban is involved, and Chief, you may have more insight into this, but it's my understanding that West Suburban currently covers an area that's to the south and west of the Holly gas station.
Okay.
Across the street where that, you can't drive there anymore, but under that viaduct. And so I know that there was discussion that took place to actually have that flipped over to West Suburban rather than Maple Plain. So I'm not sure if there's ongoing discussions
Right.
about that. I know that, I think it just took effect.
But for the purposes of this discussion, it's not necessary. You
Yeah.
know the details.
Yeah, we would bump up to that.
Yeah, okay.
So I do have a few other things. I don't know if there's.
Yeah. So I guess any objection to having staff
No?
approach
That's great.
and start the conversation?
Good idea.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Thanks.
Okay, so in the spirit of fire areas coverage, I also want to share some information. So based on the information that's been sent out on a weekly basis, I just wanted to highlight some of the Orono Fire Department incident response for the first 8 weeks of the year. So I think it's will play into some relevance as we start to share some information about costs, as well as some of the discussions we've had with our partners in Long Lake. So for the first 8 weeks of 2025, and according to the weekly updates, the city of the Orono Fire Department had 26 calls. Of those calls, 19 were duty crew response calls, 2 were duty officer response calls, and 5 were all calls. Of the 5 all calls, they've had 2 incidents in the last 7 weeks, and no all calls in the last 4 weeks. So I just wanted to share some detail about what's taken place the first 8 weeks of the year this year. The next thing I wanted to share is a little bit about Orono Fire Department Fire Service Cost and Capital Improvement Plan. And really this outlines actuals, budgeted and planned capital improvement dollars that are allocated through 2034. So, and this is information that I got from city staff. In 2023, the city of Orono had $895,393 in fire department costs. Of those costs, the Orono Fire Department costs were $384,190. And to break that down a little further, operating costs were $203,462. Capital costs were $180,728. The other contribution to the overall 2023 costs, Long Lake Fire Department costs, has service contract for $511,203. So again, 2023 was $895,393. In 2024, the cost for the city of Long Lake for fire service was $2,862,874
Long Lake?
for the city of Orono.
Okay.
So for the city of Orono, $2,862,874. The Orono Fire Department costs were $2,233,523. To break that down a little bit further, the operating costs were $828,378. Facility costs were $473,145, and capital costs were $932,000. The Long Lake Fire Department costs that year were, for a fire service contract, of $629,351, of which we'll be receiving a credit this spring, somewhere around $90,000. So again, for 2024, the total cost of the city of Orono for fire services was $2,862,874. In 2025, what's budgeted or planned is $2,317,343. The Orono Fire Department costs that roll into that number are $1,554,600. To break that down a little bit further, the operating costs are $1,040,000, and the capital costs are, well, I have two different numbers. One was $514,600, and on the CIP it's $699,500. So there's a little discrepancy. So I just went with the lower number.
The lower number you had asked for expenditures. So
Yeah.
some of those are still, when you look at the CIP, those are planned numbers.
Okay.
So it's a difference.
So the 514,000 was for Orono's portion, and then the 184,000 that makes up the higher number that you had, the 699,000, that was for that Long Lake capital expenditure for that fire truck.
Those two numbers. Yeah, right. Yeah, thank
so
you.
then it's just the lower number.
Perfect. On the Long Lake Fire Department costs in 2025, there's a service contract fee of $577,849. So again, the total cost of 2025 to the city of Orono for fire services is $2,317,343. So for the 3-year total for fire services for the city of Orono is $6,075,610. Of that, Orono Fire Department costs are $4,172,312, and the Long Lake Fire Department costs are $1,903,297, a little rounding. In addition to that, over the course of the next 9 years, for the apparatus and equipment capital planning, there's another $6,270,800 in the capital plan that's outlined in the capital plan. This does not include any operational or facility costs. So without operational or facility costs, including apparatus and equipment capital planning through 2034, the spend in capital planning totals $12,346,410, again without any operational or facility costs. So the reason that I bring that up is to share some information on the discussions that we've had with our partners in Long Lake since the beginning of the year. And I think it's relevant because it feeds into the discussion in so much that we want to make sure that there's clarity around it. One of the things that I want to mention in this meeting is that there's been some concern with a lack of communication over the course of the last 8 weeks. And I don't want the public to confuse that with a lack of transparency. The importance for Bob and I, as we've gone through this, was to maintain and try and put together something that, when presented, reflected the most accurate information we could, rather than having various versions of various narratives out there. So that's why it wasn't intended whatsoever to be a lack of transparency. It was really intended to be providing accuracy when information was shared. So again, since we've had ongoing meetings since the beginning of the year, throughout those meetings and that process, it was very important, and again, the reason I talked about capital, we want to make no mistake that public safety is our priority, but fiscal responsibility is also an important factor. Throughout the meeting process, we've been working to come to an agreement to bring the departments back together. To be more clear, the goal is not to go back to the past or jam things together. The goal is to consolidate the departments and take the best that both are doing and bring those forward. What we are saying yes to in our agreement is collaboration, partnership, and fiscal responsibility. What we're saying no to is isolation and independence. I'll share a little bit about the tenets of the agreement with our partners in Long Lake that we've been working on. As it relates to fire service, along with the Orono Fire Department, we want to restore Long Lake Fire Department coverage to the Navarre area of Orono. As it relates to fire operations, we want Orono Fire Department and Long Lake Fire Department to lead together, to train together, to staff together, and to share resources. It's another tenet of the agreement that we're working on. As it relates to future fire services, with our partners in Long Lake, we want to commit to working together to finalize a long-term fire services plan for our communities and those that would like to join around us. So the timing and next steps is really have the city staff and city attorney review the documents for legal concerns and clarity. Once those are complete, the documents will be presented to the city council for discussion with the goal of having council approval in the near future. Once that amendment is agreed to, then we believe it's critically important to have a joint town hall with our Long Lake partners to have discussions and gather feedback on a long-term collaborative fire services approach. So that's what we've been working on. I don't know, Bob, if you want to share.
No, I think you summarized it really well. I mean, I think, again, our goal is to kind of take the best of both departments. James has done a great job standing up a fire department here and sort of proved out the duty crew model. We want to take the best of that and the good things that Long Lake can do and make one department that can function seamlessly and provide the best protection we can at a fiscally responsible price for our community. That's really what we're shooting for. And we've had good discussions.
We've had very good discussions.
There's a little bit of one step forward, or two steps forward, one step back, but as you'd expect in anything like this. So.
Well, I really appreciate the principle. First of all, thank you. That's great information sharing. I'm sure everybody appreciates it. And acknowledging and appreciating the hard work that all parties have put in. It's not easy. And thank you for, taking that on and doing a fine job. What I thought I heard you say, and I'm checking from my own understanding, is the process that you just proposed, which would be to have staff and city attorney draw up an agreement for the city council to discuss and take a vote on, and then have a town hall. Is that what did I hear you right? I'm just checking to make sure I understood.
Yeah, so the way this is coming together is this would potentially be we have basically the balance of 2026 left on the contract with Long Lake, current contract.
2025.
Yeah,
2025, sorry.
Yeah, that's right.
And so what would be proposed is an amendment to the current agreement that just says, here's how we're going to operate during the balance of that contract, the short term.
Right.
But with, and this is very important, with terms under which we agree, we will agree upon to form a single department.
Longer term.
So the town hall would be relevant to discussing the long term?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
And can you clarify, you mentioned the service area in Navarre and also joint training. Can you just clarify that piece as well?
Well, some of that is, the details around that are really to be
TBD.
continue to be worked out, because we want city staff and our city attorney to see what's really been put together, so it may be premature to speak to that. I will tell you that we want there to be collaboration in all aspects of what's going on with fire services. Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
And so some easy ways to do that are train together,
Right.
you know, share resources.
Right.
Those sorts of things. And we look to the departments themselves to say, hey, how best can we work together? And we've had some of those.
How do we develop
Yeah,
this?
absolutely.
How do we develop this? Yeah.
so I'm a numbers person, so I appreciated the data. I'd like to see that and have the opportunity to just examine it. And then I'm wondering if the intention is to model out in that joint model, however it looks, what that operating and capital cost is, how it's shared, how it's allocated, and particularly modeling out the two additional parties that might be at the table. So you shared, one projection, which is the current Orono model,
Yeah.
and I'd like to see it relative to the other opportunities.
Not sure how we get that data necessarily, but yeah, it's something we should be
Yeah, otherwise it's
Yeah.
that
At least-
compared to
at
what?
least spitballing.
Some of that we until it gets turned back over to staff,
Right.
the two staffs to sit down and
Yeah,
figure that out. I mean, we make some educated guesses, but
Yeah, we could certainly, I think, make some estimated guesses on the two of us working together, expanding to other communities, that gets a little.
that
A
might
little
be,
tricky,
yeah,
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
step
And-
2
and I
maybe,
think-
or 3 or
And,
12.
and to be clear, what we are really trying to do here is to get us and Long Lake joined together
Right.
first, not, I think if we said this was going to be a broader community, it would maybe take us years.
Too long. Yeah.
And so we need to plan that that's gonna take a little bit longer, although I think there may be appetites on, in the surrounding communities for this type of thing. It just, it'll take a while to mesh multiple departments together. We're working on 2 and it's taking
Well, you'll at least have a baseline, and you'd want to be able to improve on that, both in terms of public safety and fiscal responsibility. So that makes sense to have a baseline. Yeah.
And one of the nice things that we would bring to the table, not just for us in Long Lake, but for a broader department, is that we've done some, we've made some purchases that would be very valuable to not just Long Lake, but to a broader as well.
Yeah, those capital expenses didn't turn into nothing. There's a
Right.
mess
Right,
there.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
And they were required, whether it was
Yeah.
one department or whether it was multiple departments.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We've identified that, and Steve, you said it, I mean, there was an underfunded
Mhm.
capital plan in that, I think, from the get-go,
Mhm.
back in 2000, so.
Yeah,
That was coming one way or the other. Is basically-
right,
Yeah.
right.
So we only have, we have one meeting in
This
April.
month, yeah.
Yeah,
March.
next month, we have one meeting, or no.
No, it's this
One
month.
meeting this month,
Yeah.
and then our next is it April?
14th, whatever that one is.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just thinking in terms of, is there a sense of if this is a few months out? So I mean, and again, I understand this is just, it's in process. I think these are the sorts of things I know when I get calls and emails like we all do, it's,
Yeah.
When
is
are you
there?
gonna do this?
No, I know, and that's not necessarily possible, I'm just saying, I'm putting out there what's going to be asked
Oh, that's,
of all of us.
I think the next step Bob and I have talked about is to make sure to get the draft documents over to city staff and let them review it for legal concerns or clarity, and make sure that that comes back, because if history indicates anything, we'll be going back to meet with our peers over in Long Lake to share.
And there may be tweaks coming back.
Yeah, and so that might take time, but, Bob and I have even talked about, depending on how quickly some of those things can be worked out, is there an opportunity to even call a special
Yeah.
meeting and take some steps before April 14th.
And we do have that ability, if necessary,
Yeah,
because it's a long.
obviously we need to work around people's travel schedules
Sure.
and whatnot,
Yeah.
but,
I think
also
it'd be
we need to make
beneficial
that-
to have another meeting.
Yeah, there's a sense of, I know there's a sense of urgency. I'm not saying anything that we don't all know,
Yeah.
but certainly if that's necessary, it's nice to know that we have that ability.
There are some notification requirements
Yes.
if you do want to have a special
Yeah.
meeting.
Mhm.
So if you want to have one between now and the next regular meeting, this evening, you should probably be specifying when you want to have that so that then staff can announce that and get it out there, because otherwise you don't sit again in order to decide to have a special
And
meeting.
when I say special meeting,
Sure.
are we talking work session, or are we talking regular meeting? I don't know, it just,
depends on how far we are.
yeah. Okay.
If we're ready
That's enough.
to approve something,
I don't think there's a difference in our notification. I'd ask the attorney
Okay, well,
for
that's
clarity,
helpful.
but
I thought Christina talked about the notification for comment session.
yeah. But there are only certain ways that we can have a meeting that's not declared by the whole council, and those are normally in emergency situations. So if you want to have a non-emergency scheduled meeting, my recommendation, unless they do this differently, is you should, between now and April 14th, we should make that decision in our regular meeting season. That's what I'm
Okay.
saying.
April 14th is over a month away,
Yeah.
so.
Yes.
Right.
How much notice do we have to give if we cancel the meeting?
None. We just posted that it's canceled.
Okay, then I think we should call them.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
So, on the topic of sense of urgency, so, am I understanding correctly that this short term, would that be to cover the balance of the existing contract?
Yeah.
So,
Or if we got to a, call it JPA, a Joint Powers Agreement, earlier, we could jump to that sooner than the end of the year.
that's
mutually
sort of
agree.
where my head is going, is that there's not a whole lot of time left to
Right.
negotiate a long-term JPA or whatever, whatever form it takes. Would it, from a risk management perspective, if we were to get to the end of this year without an agreement, then we would be in not a good place. Would it be reasonable to consider extending the existing contract, not just through 2025, in its short-term new form for another 6 months or 12 months to allow for, measured and comfortably paced conversations that don't feel rushed?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's been discussed along those lines is that any party could unilaterally determine to extend the contract for an
Okay.
additional year if they're uncomfortable with the direction we're going. And so that
That's-
buys us
It's a
all
good
some time to,
lever, yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
But that's not been
We're not
necessarily
in a
done.
bad position to cover, what needs to be covered too. I mean, we would need some more people, absolutely, but from that perspective, we would have to start recruiting more and hiring more.
Exactly, but you'd have to probably start that and think about that now,
We'd have to
so,
start doing that now,
yeah. So it's just, having an escape route, a plan B, a contingency option,
Yeah.
if the worst case happens. You always want to have something like that in your back
Yep.
pocket,
Yep. Yeah, no, good
or
question.
your front pocket.
Yeah. Yeah. Other questions? I thought you did a nice job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It's a very nice job.
Thanks.
It's much appreciated, and it's been a long road, and I think it's really nice to have the numbers presented in this forum. I guess my only other question about that is, to your point, is this something?
I want to see
This
it.
is- Right, I understand. And so what does the council do or the staff do with what you've just presented here? This isn't a slide. We've talked about it openly. Is that something that, we take notes on and answer questions, or direct people to staff if they want that information after the fact, or is that something that you're?
Yeah, I mean, what I did was I took information that was shared with me and essentially put it into an Excel
Okay.
table.
That's been something that I know folks have asked for over time, is a one-page document of what has Orono spent. And I don't know that our city has produced something like that.
Yeah, we have.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's posted, the exact same information that we just covered here tonight?
Yeah, we just keep redoing it every time we get asked.
Okay, and it's posted to the website?
We get asked a lot.
Okay, yeah, and I'm not in the week, is that on the website then?
No, we just, because it's constantly changing as we
Okay.
spend our money, so.
Okay. So that's something, if the public is interested, they direct those questions to you. Okay, thank you.
But will you be sharing that material with us? I just.
Oh, this,
Yeah, I mean,
I'm more than happy to, how do I do this?
just put it down.
Okay.
Send them to me, I can distribute them.
Okay, that sounds good, yep.
That solves that.
Only have
Yep.
Because
reference
The
to-
next question is, you know, well, I've been asked, when we have work sessions, and this goes for any issue, we have our agenda, we sometimes put things on the screen, other times things are presented that then the public will say, can I have that document, or what was that thing? So this is a global question, actually. It's not really specific to just this work session. So on that note, Adam, whether it's this work session or others where we are presenting information is the best case scenario, that if we are talking about something or something presented in a work session, that folks can come to you and access those plans or those bullet points or whatnot.
Yep, if people want us, like this was in the packet, but
Yes, it
if
was.
somebody wants it.
Sometimes.
Janie likes to send me emails on Tuesdays, and
Okay,
I send her the packet.
okay.
So
Very good.
will Steve's, what you presented will be available then?
Well, I'll send it to Adam, and
Just-
then,
Yep, once it comes to me, it's a public document, so
Yep,
if
okay.
you ask for it, I give it to you.
Good deal.
All right, well, that solves that then.
Perfect.
Thank you. No, it's a very good summary. Much appreciated.
What do we got? We got 20 minutes left?
But if we are going to have declare a meeting.
Yeah, so let's,
Informally on your calendars now. and
yes,
then,
let's do that.
If we had a second meeting in March, it would be the 24th. But because of the way that the Mondays play out, you could also do one on the 31st, and it would still be another 2 weeks to the 14th, so you still have a spacing.
Yeah.
If you
so
wanted to keep it-
24th is
Yeah.
Orono spring break. Anybody
It is.
taking that? Are you?
I will be here.
You'll be
I
here?
will be here.
Okay.
I will be here.
I'll be here.
Everybody here that week? I am.
Yeah.
Say the 24th.
5 or 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock, I would say.
I will not, Bob, so.
Okay. Shoot, okay. Spring break is a real thing for your family, I understand that. Yes. Okay. So yeah, so you need to add that to the.
If somebody, when we get to add that to the agenda.
To the agenda.
Just make a motion
Okay.
and direct staff to post for a meeting on the
Okay.
24th at 6 PM, and we can take it from there.
Guys, come on, nice.
Otherwise, we can set up the room for the council meeting.
Yep. All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. And for a special meeting, I suspect we have to say what that environment is.
I think so, I'm gonna check this one.
I'm pretty sure we will.
I think we did.
But of course, we could either meet and say we're not ready yet for the third, or we could even cancel it before. Right. But that's today, that's today.
Say the negotiation team says we're not ready yet.
Have you ever raised your hand? Well, that's what we're doing. It's just so important.
It's around doing the conference.